Welcome back to VFX for the Indie Filmmaker, and in this module we're going to be going over compositing in Silhouette. Now, unlike our last two modules when we went over compositing in Fusion and After Effects, those were just kind of to show you can do it and give you just a brief concept of it all. This module we're actually going to be going in depth, step by step on how to composite our shot that we rendered out in Blender. So firstly, if you haven't done so, if you go back to our other module, make sure you download the footage we're going to be using that we exported out of Blender. And secondly, if you don't have Boris FX Silhouette, you can go to borisfx.com, and if you go to their products, I've got the suite, but you can download what you want, and you can get a free trial to use any of this software. And in this module, we're actually going to be using Sapphire, Continuum, probably Mocha Pro, and Silhouette. And this is the actual program we'll be working in, is Silhouette, which is a standalone program they have for rotoscoping and paint, but it's much more than that. You can do in-depth rotoscoping for extremely difficult shots and paint correction for footage and everything. But it's also used for compositing, which you can see they used in Guardians of the Galaxy for compositing. It's a pretty robust program. It reminds me of Nuke, actually. And I don't want to say it's a dumbed down version because there's nothing dumb about Silhouette. It's, I would say, more of a stripped down version of Nuke, but the concept is the same. But if you go here, you can download free trials. Additionally, if you've never used a program before, if you go to the training under all videos, they've got hundreds and hundreds of training videos that Ben and the other people at Boris FX do. So you can get your getting started tutorials and figure out the program itself, because I won't have time to go over compositing and show you how to actually use everything in this program. I'll touch on stuff that you're going to need, but other than that, I would definitely go over to Boris FX and go over their tutorial videos first. And if you've done that and you're all ready, we'll jump in. So the way Silhouette works is first you create a project, and I already did, so I'm not going to create another one, but you create an actual project. And within this project, you do what's called sessions. So for example, for my video, I created a project for all of scene 1, and then another project for all of scene 2. And then within each project, I would do sessions for each shot. So it would be scene 2, shot 1, scene 2, shot 2 would be another session. All right, first thing we're going to do before we actually create a session is we're going to bring our footage in. So any footage we need, and I already did accidentally, I don't know why. If you go down here and just click this folder, and you can go to wherever you downloaded your footage to, and if you select the folder, your sequences are automatically just going to be listed as sequences as long as you have this detect sequences. Otherwise, it's going to show everyone. So if you just click that button and select your footage you want, just hit open and it'll populate in here. So once you have that, just make sure you're clicked on one of them. It's going to give you the info. We got 48 frames, 49.6 by 2160 at 16-bit. So just make sure you clicked on one of them and create a new session. So session, new session. And what this does is it automatically changes your formatting. If you don't do that, it's going to have the standard format and you're going to have to select everything. But we'll go ahead and rename this to Scene 2, Shot 30 Tutorial. And you can see right down here, they've got the size and your pixel aspect ratio. Duration is 48 frames, and we want to change this to 30 frames a second. And this start frame really doesn't matter. It's going to be a little confused by some of this stuff. Like had we select this, it would have started at frame 0601, but it really doesn't matter. And then down here, just make sure you can go to float 32, but for this tutorial, I'm just going to leave it float 16, so it's a little bit faster. And just hit OK, and it's going to open a new project with whatever you selected as your footage in there. I'm going to change my workspace to my ultra wide one I created. It just works better for me, and I really don't need to see all that. What I really want is room here and a lot of room here in these nodes. All right, so we're going to go ahead and disconnect this. And basically the way it works is just kind of like Fusion. You know, you've got your media and then you've got your output. So anything that's going into your output is what's going to be output in the project. Firstly, we're going to go ahead and get all of our footage in. So get our floor and our walls and our throne and our wings. So this is all the footage that we're working with. Now down here in the bottom, you can go from timeline to nodes, and these are all the nodes that you can work with. And if you've got Sapphire loaded, all the Sapphire nodes will be here. The Continuum nodes are going to be under the OFX right here. So these are all the Continuum nodes. But we're going to go ahead and go to some of my favorites that I set up, and we're going to throw some composites down. And again, just like Fusion, these are kind of our merge nodes, but they're compositing nodes in Silhouette. And all these nodes are pretty simple. If you can see all the colors, and if you just highlight over, it tells you exactly what it is. This is the foreground input, the background input, your mats, and you've got obey mat inputs and your output. So and every node has specific things. Some nodes have data inputs, and which will be used, and I'll show you that. So we're going to go ahead and go from our floor and our walls and bring in our thrones, because that's our next level, to the foreground. So now we've got our wall in our foreground, our wall in our throne. Bring this in. We'll bring our wings up front. And if you click on these nodes, it's gonna view the nodes, but you can also view that one and see the info for this node down here. If you click this little info button, or if you click the screen, it'll view that node, and I can see the info for this one. We're going to go from this one and this into our foreground, and we'll bring this into our output and view our output. So there's all of our footage set up and ready to composite. Now before we start throwing effects and getting our color in, the first thing I really want to do is any rotoscoping or tracking I got to do. I would much rather do it on just plain raw footage, because you've got down here you can see you've got RAM limits. So if I play through, you can see it takes a little while for the footage to load in the RAM, and every time we make a change, it's going to repurge that RAM and have to recache everything. And if we start throwing all of our color changes and all of our, say, glow or blur or anything like that, it's going to have to process every single one of them nodes every single time. So some of the more tedious stuff where I'd like to be a little faster so I can view what's going on, like rotoscoping and masking stuff out, I like to do before I do any type of effects on it. All right, the first node we're going to bring in is our roto node, so we can start tracking her eyes. So if we go to, I've got it in my favorites, but if you go to image, there's a roto node. Just bring that up and connect that in the foreground, and we're going to view that. So the roto node is basically kind of like a tracking node. You've got various ways to track, and I'll show you here in a second. What we want to do is first create layers, because this roto node works off of layers, kind of like Photoshop does. So we're going to create our first layer, and we're going to name this eye left. We'll create another one. We'll name it eye right. So we're going to do two things. We're going to, one, track the eye, and two, we're going to create a matte and track that matte on her eye. So the eye track will be used in other effects to kind of track her eyes, or use that data to track her eyes. That's what this yellow input and output mean. These are for your data info, such as tracking data. So firstly, let's go ahead and track. So if you go over here on the side and click this track button, you've got a few ways to track. You've got using the Mocha node. It's kind of a native Mocha node in here. You can also add a Mocha Pro node itself and open it within Mocha Pro, but this will work just fine. You've also got planar tracking, and you've got point tracking. So we're going to go ahead and use the point tracker to just track her eyes. So if we're going to track her left eye, we'll click on the left eye, and we're going to hit create. So this is going to create a point tracker. We'll just bring it right over there near that shiny bit. And we're going to leave everything just the same, but we're going to track forward. So there we go. We've got our first track of her eye. Now I noticed this didn't put it in her left eye, but we're going to name this eye left track. And we're going to create another one. Track her right eye. So we'll go ahead and track that forward. And we'll rename this eye right track. And now we're going to go ahead and create our mattes on her eyes. So we'll do her left eye first, and we're going to use Mocha for this. We're going to create a X-spline, just like we do in Mocha, and create a spline around her eye. And once we do that, we're going to click on the track node, and we're going to track. We're at the end, so we'll track backwards. And I'm going to make sure I got shear and perspective marked. And I'm going to leave all this tolerance and everything the same. So we'll track backwards. And then we'll get her, well, first let's go ahead and rename this to eye left matte. And oops. And we'll select her right eye, and we're going to create a new spline on her right eye. And select the track button, and we'll track that forward. I already see it's getting a little wonky there on the right side of it, but we can fix it because I wanted to show you this anyway. So this is our eye right matte. And with your matte selected, whatever you want to fix, if you go to the timeline, you can see all the keyframes it's created. And then up here, these little red markers are keyframes that you have on the timeline. So all we have to do is select this edit button, and we can edit our actual matte. And to be able to select so you don't see all this stuff, you can just click off and then click back on. So we'll go all the way to the end and see how our matte's looking, and it's off. So we're just going to drag this around. See right here, it does something kind of weird. So we'll go ahead and fix that. All right. I think that will be good. Yeah, it looks kind of weird because she's squinting a little bit, so it looks like it's making that shrink, but it's actually kind of squinting with her eyelids. So that is good. All right, I paused real quick and I just cleaned this up to get the layers right, just because I like it being nice and clean. So I've got the right eye with the right eye matte in a track and a left eye matte in a track. This tends to work a little weird when you have multiple mattes. So what I did is for the right eye right here on the layer itself, I made sure the blend mode was add, and I put a little blur on there. You'll see why here in a second. And then the left eye multiply, so it's multiplying that matte. If you have this to add as well, only one of them is going to show up. So have one on add and have the second one on multiply, and then that way both mattes will shine through. All right, the next node we're going to add is an invert. And you can just go to the search button, invert. We're going to edit invert node. And on this invert node, we just want to make sure we come from the color composite image out, because you have multiple outs. We'll come from this into the input, and it's going to look odd, but it basically inverted our matte, so our eyes are just shining through, because that's all the info we want is our eyes. Now the next node we're going to add is a color correct node. So if we just go to color, look for color correct, we'll add a color correct node right there. We're going to bring that in. And all we're going to do is we just want to change the hue of this. So make it like a nice bright orange. So we're going to, and we're looking at the eyes there is what we're looking at. So we'll change that temperature. Trying to pick a nice orange I like, so that'll work. And we can always go back and forth and change it if we don't like it. So the next node we're going to add is a blur node. So we'll just search blur, And we can just use a basic blur. Blur, blur, blur. I don't need the BCC blur, just a basic blur. There we go. And put that in. I blurred it up quite a bit. I'm just gonna knock this down to like 2, maybe. So it's just a little blurry. So now we've basically got our eyes. So this is just our eyes coming out. Our image isn't quite coming out yet. So we're going to composite all this back together so it's on top of her. So we're going to add another composite node. And we're going to bring our original image into the background and our new eyes to the foreground. And there we go. We've got her orange eyes. Now I would usually add a little more to make it look like these eyes are reflective, like so it's a little orange up and around her cheeks. But we're gonna add a flare to make it look like her eyes are really bright and glowing. So that's gonna hide some of that stuff. So it'll still look fairly realistic. Well, as realistic as glowing eyes can look. This little stuff that I worry about, because naturally if her eyes were orange, you would see a little orange on the side of her nose and reflecting at the top of her eyelids. But I'm not going to worry about that because, like I said, we're going to have flares shining from her eyes, and it's going to hide the lack of those reflective surfaces. Now, before we move any further, we're going to go ahead and get some color correction and a little matte correction. I see some issues with the matte, so we're going to add a color correct. And I kind of have a pre-color correct saved on here, so I'm gonna put that in there, and I know it's gonna make her look super dark right now, but that's kind of what I want. And all I really did for this is my settings are, I brought the gamma way down, like -44. I pumped the contrast up a little bit to like 6. And that is really it. That's all the color correction I really did. And I just wanted this super deep, moody look on her. So that's why I dropped that gamma down so much. But it's all up to taste. What you want it to look like, it's up to you. I want to fix this matte too before I move on, so I'm going to add a matte repair. Matte repair. And I'm going to stick that right below. So I was just checking a couple color channels. So in this matte repair, I'm just shrinking it down a little bit just to get rid of some of those edges that I could see coming around here. I know it's hard to see, but they're there, believe me. So a little matte repair going on. And this is our final look for our actual actress. Now all we have to do is replace our input over here. And there we go. Now this is where some of this stuff starts getting a little hectic. Like I said, the more nodes you add, the more you got to do cleanup so it's nice and pretty. All right, next we're gonna work on these wings. I'm going to throw another color correct. And stick it right there. And just work on this brightness a little bit. So that's good right there. No huge changes. Bring it out. There we go. And again, these 3D renders are a little too sharp for me. So I'm going to add another blur. Can't believe I don't have blur in I do have blur in my favorites. There we go. Another blur, way too much. So let's pump this down to about 2. And there we go. And let's go ahead and do a playthrough. And this is where you're going to kind of see it chugging along a little slower. Not much slower. And there's our freaky flickering wings. All right, looking good. All right, the next thing I want to do is we're going to get our flares going on her eye. There's a couple things I want to do, only really a few things. I want to add some motion blur to both the wings and to her, and add these flares to the eyes. But that motion blur, once I start adding motion blur in here, it's really gonna slow this down. So we'll go ahead and work on the flares first. All right, so to add a lens flare, I know it's in my favorites, but if you don't have favorite set up, it'll be under Sapphire. And then lighting, I believe. And there's lens flare right there. So we're gonna use the Sapphire lens flare. And actually, before we go any further, let's make sure we save this, because these tend to shut down the program sometimes. So I'm going to go ahead and go from this composite to the input, and from the input to our output. All right, so the Sapphire lens flare is much more than just your average lens flare plugin on most stuff that just has presets and you can't change too much. You can actually edit everything within this lens flare, because it pretty much breaks every little bit and piece down so you can change everything. So spot 1, if you need to change your color, you can change your color, and the rays, the rings, every little bit and piece of this you can recreate and save it as a preset. And it takes a little time to get your flares just right, how you want them to look, but it's worth fine-tuning everything. So I'm going to go ahead and load my preset, since it is a bit time consuming. It's kind of a tutorial in itself on creating lens flares and editing lens flares. So I'm going to load a preset that I've already created, and there's also tons of pre-made presets which are great. They work well, but I'm going to load this one up. And the way this works is, first I'm going to go ahead and get this on her eye. And I don't know why it's jumping around like that. It normally doesn't do that. get this right where I want it on her eye. So once we have this place where we initially want it, what we can do is this yellow data that I was talking about before that we created from that track, we can go ahead and bring that data and input it to the data input of the lens flare. Now once we do, you'll have options down here at this hotspot and the pivot point as well, but we're going to use the hotspot to select what eye. And it's going to be, I know I changed the names, I flipped them around, but so right eye is what we're going to use as tracking data for this flare. So as we move around, that flare is following her right eye, her left eye, but her right eye to us. That's that. So what we can do is we can copy this node. And let's go ahead and save it again first. And paste the node. And we'll go ahead and connect the input, connect the output, and make sure our flare is where we want. Connect this data to this flare, and we'll select her left eye. Now we've got both flares in her eyes, tracking her eyes. So let's give this a quick playthrough. And there we go. That's where we're at so far. So the next thing I want to do is go ahead and add some motion blur just to get a little life into it, because it still looks just kind of blah and crisp, which I don't want. So we'll go ahead and save our project and look for a motion blur. And I do not have it in my favorites. Yes, I do. Right there. And we're going to place this first. We're going to work on these wings. And I'm going to go ahead and make my settings. Blur amount to 50, velocity to 100. This looks pretty good for right now. We'll go ahead and try it out. And place that in our input. Place our composite. And let's see how this is looking at certain spots. There we go. We're blurring up nicely, quite a bit. I might knock that down just a little bit. Let's go 1.5. There we go. And that looks nice. So I'm just going to copy this. And we're going to place this from our out of her. So we are including her actual footage and her eyes. So we want all this to go through our motion blur. So we're going to input that in, replace this composite with a motion blur. And that will blur her movement up a little bit. And I'll probably up it. Let's try 2. Let's see how she looks while she's moving. Actually, let's go ahead and give this a full playthrough. Right, so there we go. There's our composited footage. And anything else you want to add, you can just add and stick within the composite, and you'll be good to go. All right, with that done, the only thing we have left to do is output our footage. In the output node, I would usually export it as OpenEXR, but as I've said many times, I had issues with Blender and EXRs. So I'm going to keep it to what I've been using, which is PNGs. So then you select your file output. And for mine, I would go from footage, scene 2, image sequences from Silhouette, which means all my composited video would go into a folder called From Silhouette. So my final composites will be done as PNG sequences in this folder. So once you select your folder, just select your channels you want. Don't worry about this views, you just want the main one. And select your numbering format. So if you want it 001, you can start at 001 and then hit render. And once you render it, it will render all the way through. Now, one issue I did have was if my buffer wasn't big enough to fit everything in there. Like right now, I've got plenty of room in my buffer, so everything's playing. But if you ran halfway through and you see your buffers hit its max and then it starts rebuffering everything else, it's going to affect your renders. It affected mine anyway. For instance, if it only buffered 24 frames and I rendered the full thing, frame 1 through 24 would render fine, and then frame 25 to 48 would all just be black. Because I believe it must have to go through your caching process before it actually renders. So if your cache is full, it's not actually going to render the image. So what I had to do is, when I would render things that I couldn't cache all completely, I would select a file, and I'll just create a new one. File name, test. So when I would hit render, what I would do is I would only render a certain range. So instead of rendering the entire work range, 1 from 48, I would do custom and do 1 through 24. I would apply it and then render it. And once I rendered those 24, I'd go through and render 25 through 48 and apply it and render it. And that way I didn't have any issues rendering everything. But for some reason, if it wasn't cached completely, it would just render black images and not the actual composited image. And some, even though it was only 48 frames, some compositing was so robust that I could only render 8 frames at a time. And so I had to keep coming back and re-rendering. So just watch for that. And that was in a later version. I know now we're in Silhouette 24.5, I believe. And they may have fixed that issue. I didn't test it out, but clearly I can render all this. And additionally, in the earlier versions, I don't remember seeing RAM and GPU both up here. It was either only RAM or only GPU. So they may have corrected that. So if you know, let me know. So that is compositing. In the next module, we'll be bringing our footage back into DaVinci so we can start our finalizing process. So, see you then. If you like this video and would like access to the full course, you can visit my PayHit page, link in the description. For only $26, you're getting access to 6 hours of instructional video, as well as access to footage, Blender project files, and other pre-production file downloads. The VFX for the Indie Filmmaker course covers complete instruction from pre-production to project delivery and includes modules such as keying and compositing, creating and rendering 3D sets, and everything else you'll need to know to go from charging hundreds of dollars per project to thousands of dollars per project.